Welcome to the Uncommon Communicator Podcast. I am your host, James Gable, and this is where we bring enlightenment to the topic of communication. Are you ready to take ownership of your conversations? Are you looking to possess the skills to navigate and facilitate conversations to a mutual understanding? Then grab your growth mindset and let's go. Hello and welcome to the Uncommon Communicator Podcast. It is my pleasure today to have Gary Ross. Gary is a leadership communication training and consultant, and he also trains teams to get it done. I don't think I worded that right. I actually stole that from your LinkedIn. Leadership communication training and consulting, so teams actually get things done. I thought that was so crystal clear. Welcome to the show, Gary.
Thanks a lot, James. It's great to be here.
So what brings you and I together? I think we share a common topic, don't we?
Well, we're passionate about communications, and I just got to say that it's great to see someone who isn't necessarily in a communication role as his quote unquote day job be so passionate about communications. I think we need a lot more of that in the business world. So I think that's what brings us together.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Yeah, that is so true. And it's so funny is that it is everything to do with my day job and everybody else's day job. And I think that's one of the most important things. Well, let's just dive right into it. What I love is you have 3 number one rules. Now it took me a while. I read it a couple of times. Like, how can they all be number one? I do want to ask this question is, tell me, what is your number one rule of your number one rules?
Well, they're all tied for number one. I was never very good at math, so that's what happens. No, they're all number one because they're all tied for number one, and they're all equally as important. I don't feel like I could really rank them because overall they're all equally important. And depending on what situation you're in, you may want to go toward one of those rules first. And so there's no real order there. So, and they're my rules and I can do that.
I threw that in there. I was hoping to get you to commit to that, but that's perfectly fine. One thing that I noticed, and I'm a fan of the rule of 3, and you came up with 3 rules, which is right in the rule. But what, after all your years in comms, communication training, what was really the moment, or what was the thing that got you to these three rules?
I think it was a cumulative effect over many years. I spent 20 years in-house in communications departments, and I led communications departments at companies like Hyatt Hotels and CDW and Fortune Brands. And then I've been consulting and training on my own now for about 12 years. And a lot of the common themes just kept coming up. And I would see what people were struggling with and also what enabled them to communicate well in the end to achieve business results. And by the way, that's what all this is about, is to communicate to achieve business results and also to perform well in your job and advance your career. So there's 2 parts of this, and that's what makes it a business skill. People call it a soft skill, which I don't like that term. I shudder when I hear that term because it's all about it's all about being a business skill and being a good business person and helping your business accomplish its goals. And so, over the years, when I see people challenged in certain situations, it's these 3 things that really are at the heart of the matter, I think.
Yeah, and I would say you're the first person I've ever heard call it business skills, and I love that because I think we share the dislike for the soft skill because it is certainly not that at all. So I appreciate that, and that's
just think about it. You notice the difference when people are not good communicators. You notice a difference in an organization that doesn't communicate well. They don't perform as well as others. There's been research on the best companies to work for, which generally are strong in trust and communication. They perform better. Their stock prices, those that are public companies, perform better. So it's not a nice to have. It's really crucial for business performance.
Yeah, I like how you separate the 2 also from just like the personal communication skills, but businesses need to communicate. And it's not just one person with a voice. I'm a huge fan. I'm a systems thinker. I love thinking about things in systems, and communication is exactly that. like communication is what systems are in place for, for the teams to communicate, and how do you do that? Like I do that often, like when I meet somebody new, what do you prefer? Text, phone call, carrier pigeon, newspaper, trying to find out what is their form of communication. But that's just creating a system, and businesses need to do that as well too. That's a great point. Well, I like how your three that you have really they are consolidated. They're very concise, and I think they fit in so many different areas. Not only just in having these number one rules, but they fit in like public speaking. They fit in your daily communication. They fit everywhere. The first one I wanted to talk about was know your audience, because that one is very it's deep to me, because I love doing a lot of public speaking, and that is often what I hear a lot is know your audience. But what I guess what help me understand that one a little bit better from your perspective.
Well, you were just getting at it just now when you're talking to people, when you're asking somebody, how do they want to communicate? What's the best way to reach them? Knowing your audience is all about communicating the right thing to the right people in the right way at the right time, and making sure that what you're communicating is relevant to people, making sure that it's something they can act on, making sure that it's timely for them too. Because if it's not any of those things, then it's like, well, what do I do with this information? And then they start tuning out other things that might be more important for them to hear. And that's the beginning of a communications breakdown. Hmm. So it's all about thinking about what motivates people, what do they need to hear from you, also what you want from them as well, and truly understanding who your audience is. Now, it's easy to kind of have this default thinking of, oh, I know my audience. It's these 5 people, and I've worked with them for 5 years, and this person's a little crabby and this person's a little enthusiastic, and I know their tone and all. Well, yeah. And that all that stuff is important, but it's also about what do they really want to hear from you? What do they need to hear from you? What motivates them? And what do you need from them as well? And so to really pause and think about that gives you a much deeper understanding of who your audience is.
Yeah. One thing is to initially identify it, right? I think isn't that like the course to every 12 steps starts with, you gotta admit it or something. But it's the idea that you have to acknowledge it, like you're looking for it. But I think what I love about the know your audience is because it's in some ways, around some of the circles I run around, a little bit cliche, right? Because it's so concise and so pinpointed and it's so deep in its meaning. So what I was hearing from you though is like really knowing what they want, knowing what you want to communicate, right? And what you want them to communicate to you. And a lot of those things can come from what you were pointing out, or like relationships or things about people. But is there a good time to really like research deep, or how can we research into knowing our audiences a little bit better?
Asking yourself those questions. What do they need? What motivates them? What do they want to hear? What do they need to hear? And thinking about that and making the communication relevant to them. I'll tell you a story, and that's foreshadowing for another rule, by the way. But I'll tell you a story where an executive that who I used to work with, he fell flat on his face because he didn't know his audience. He was just promoted to become CFO of an airline, and he's a cool guy, a nice guy, and he wanted to be kind of that man of the people and so on. So he went into one of the airline's maintenance hangars at 2 a.m. And he figured, well, if I go introduce myself to the folks on the graveyard shift, they'll see that I'm a real guy, that I care and all that. And that's great motivation and so on. So he goes up to an airplane mechanic who's deep in his work, and he gets the guy's attention, and the guy looks up and he takes off his eye protection and his ear protection. And the executive, sticks out his hand and says, "Hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm the new CFO here at the airline." And the technician looked at him and said, "So the F what?" Except he didn't say the F. He said the whole thing. and then put his PPE back on and got back to work. And that episode taught that executive a very important thing about communication, that when you're communicating at work, and arguably in other situations, but when you're communicating at work, it's not about you, the communicator. It's about the audience, the people you're communicating with, people you're giving information to, or you want them to follow you on something or do a specific action. Right. And that stayed with him for the rest of his career. That moment where he was, here he was, one of the top people in the company, and he just got dressed down by somebody on the graveyard shift for not knowing that, this guy really didn't care that there was a new CFO in town. Now, if he had led with, hey, I'm the new CFO and I want to know, more about what you guys need here in the hangar or what have you, then he might have had a conversation, because that would have made it more about the technician.
Yeah.
But instead it came across as being all about him.
Yep.
And he fell flat on his face. And that stuck with him throughout the rest of the career. The rest of his career was a very profound lesson for him. And that, I think, goes to show you. So when you ask about researching the audience, perhaps he could have, he could have decided, all right, I'm going to go at 2 a.m. to this maintenance hangar, and I want to know what these folks care about, so I can have a conversation with them and engage with them, learn something, and also have them feel like I am here to listen to them and to make their jobs easier. That would have been a much more valuable conversation than, hi, I'm the new CFO.
Right. Well, and I use that principle as well too, as far as like, people really don't care who I am. Like, I'm a director of operations for a general contractor, and I'm fairly new to this role this year. People don't care what that is, but if I walk on a job site, and this is what I coach our superintendents to do, and anyone else that has those interactions with the guys in the field, because the guys in the field, like what he did is he went to the actual person doing the work. That's impressive. Like to make that whole thought is really, really impressive that he did.
It was a nice gesture. Yeah.
Yeah. But if you truly come in and lead with a genuine curiosity about them, then they will remember forever who you are. My favorite is like, who was that?
A great
again?
point.
That's what you want. You want, who was that again? Because really you come in and care about how that person is, what they're doing. At the end of the day, like, me announcing who I am doesn't get me really anything.
Right. So when you think about knowing your audience, you want to consider to yourself, and by the way, this all applies to the range of communication at work, everything from an informal hallway conversation to an executive presentation and everything in between, a weekly staff meeting, shift huddle, what have you. But once you think about these things about your audience, then you want to consider, all right, what do I want people to think, feel, and do as a result of my communication with them? What do I want them to think, feel, and do? Now, I don't suggest people sit and fill out a little worksheet before every hallway conversation. Okay, what do I want these people to think, feel, do? But it becomes something, it becomes like a mental muscle that you want to train. So when you find yourself in those hallway conversations and all of a sudden 30 seconds, 60 seconds into the conversation, you realize, oh, this is a substantial conversation. Then you want to think to yourself, all right, what do I want people to think as a result of this conversation? What's the news? What are the basic facts? How do I want them to feel? Which we had just talked about with this airline example. I want this person to feel like this new executive cares about me, that he's in tune with what's going on in my workplace and so forth. And then ultimately, what do you want people to do? What's the action that you want people to take as a result of your communication? And that, believe it or not, that's the part that gets left off the most, is what do we want people to do? We've all seen the email toward the end of a quarter or the end of a year where we get this note from an executive and they say, hey, we're 5% behind our goal for the end of the year, but we have the best team in the industry, and I need you to finish the year strong. Okay, so in there we've got think, which is to know that we're 5% behind our goal. We've got feel, which is, hey, this person thinks I'm top notch. I'm part of a top notch team. And that's great confidence to give to a team. And then the do part was finish the year strong. Well, what does that mean? What do I need to actually do? And then so I turn to my manager and I say, well, what do they mean finish the year strong? And then the manager looks back at you and says, I don't know. I got the same email. I don't know what that means either. And so, you know, we're 2/3 of the way there, but then we leave people hanging. So be very explicit in what we ask people to do. People crave that direction, actually.
Yeah. And I love that it's think, feel, do, those three things. I love that you pointed out, because so many times we're like, I got a simple metric for you, and they give you like a 7-point acronym word to go build your communication. But you're right, they're simple. You're not expecting people to write it down, but if you do one of them, right? If you think in your mind, I'm going to do it. I'm a huge fan of repetition, like putting the reps in. That's one thing I love about Toastmasters as an organization, is it allows people to get up and just practice the things that they're uncomfortable with. And just like that think, feel, do, a lot of times people are stuck on the do, right? They're not on the other two. And in this case, it was an interesting story that like they forgot the do. Like, what does do mean? So they all tie together.
And by the way, that also helps you make sure your communication is solid, because if you're thinking through that and you get to the do part and you're like, well, I'm not exactly sure what I want people to do. Oh, well, then it's time to take a step back before you even communicate.
Right.
And think about the work and what you need people to do, what you want people to do. Because if you don't do that, then you're going out and communicating something that's nebulous and people don't understand. And then you get a finish the year strong situation.
Yeah,
where people don't exactly know what's expected of them.
Right.
And that's a communication breakdown. So the whole exercise of think, feel, do, make sure that you've got your ducks in a row before you're going out to communicate in the first place.
Yeah. And like I was saying, like I've seen the do part fail as well. It's like, how come they don't do what I tell them to do? Well, You didn't think, and you didn't bring anything in of supportive for what they're doing. Like they truly do need to, they need to work together to get there, because I've actually had that like recently, man. I've been telling them to do it and they're not doing it. I'm like, then you're doing something wrong. Like you're in charge and they're not doing it, there's a breakdown here.
Right.
So and it is communication. It's maybe leadership. It's authority. There's all those things kind of tied in there. But what you're saying is you add in the think and the feel, you get a lot more action out of the do.
You do in the modern workplace. Now, unless you're in the military or some sort, or a police department or some sort of explicit command and control structure like that, in the vast majority of workplaces, the think and the feel part is really important, because people want ownership of their work. People want to know why their work matters, why it connects to the greater goal. And that's what the think and the feel part does.
Well, coming from, I'm in construction, and construction is still what we call legacy construction, which is not how we're going to perform work moving into the next generation. It's not successful anymore. It came right from that command and control thing. And that's why even in my mind, like you tell somebody to do it, they do it, isn't how this generation is responding. And it's not really an effective way to communicate and to motivate people. But that is what has been the custom in construction, in the military, and all of these command and control. And it's just really, it's almost weak sauce and trying to, get what you want done without the think and feel in there too. So those are just some really, really deep points.
That's a great point. It shouldn't be used as a crutch. And then, you were kind of just touching on this right now with the do piece. If we're not sure of what we want them to do, or if we know what we want them to do, but then we realize, oh wait, they don't have the resource to do what we want them to do. They don't have the proper tools or the time or what have you to do their best work. Well, then we got to think about how we're supporting the team and if our goals are reasonable and all that. And then all of a sudden that becomes a business conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's where we see the link between communication and being a business skill.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're going to jump into one of the other rules because they're not in order. There's no particular order. I couldn't even get you nailed down to a top 1, 2, or 3, but
They're all tied.
You brought up the story part, which I think this is another kind of public speaking trick. Is people love stories. I think businesses love stories. I with 39 years in construction now, people, I don't know if they like stories, but my stories are going to help them and to effectively give them. But I guess tell me more about your perspective on telling stories, especially in the communication.
So this rule I call tell them a story. And it really just takes advantage of the fact of the way our brains are wired. Since caveman times, we've been communicating by stories. I mean, think of caveman drawings. Those are all stories. And there's something about a story structure that it actually alters brain chemistry, research shows, but it draws us in, gets us emotionally involved. We want to see how things are going to turn out. I mean, anybody who's binge watched anything feels that power.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to use that power in the workplace. Now, I'm not saying we need to sit around a campfire and with flashlights up to our face and, tell ghost stories or anything like that. But you can take anything that you need to communicate at work, put it in the form of a story, and all of a sudden you have what could be a set of dry information now becomes something that people lean into. They want to know how it turns out. They want to know how they're a part of it. They see themselves in it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a promise at the end of a resolution. We all crave certainty. And part of that is what draws people in. And so how do we do that? How do we take the most dry piece of information and turn it into a story?
Mm-hmm.
We ask ourselves 4 questions. There's 4 questions to this. Where are we now? Where are we going and why? How will we get there? What will it look like when we get there? Answer each of those questions with just 1 sentence on whatever it is you're working on. Then you've got a 4-sentence through line on a story. And the way you use that in communication is that becomes sort of the foundation of what you're communicating about that specific subject over time.
Mm-hmm.
So the individual pieces of communication, whatever they may be, all tie back to that story. Everything's in context. People can make sense of it because they're invested in that story.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give you an example. And the example I use the most on this is the Wizard of Oz, because by the way, this storytelling structure, you'll see it think of your favorite movie, your favorite novel. You will see it in those works of art, of literature, film, and so on. Sometimes it's one of those threads. Sometimes it's 3 of those threads stretched together. But the Wizard of Oz, I think, gives us the simplest example. So I could come up to you and say, hey, there was this visitor to a town and she met with a civic leader and then she left. That's factual.
Right.
In this story. But what if I also told you, where are we now? Well, this girl is stuck in Oz. The girl from Kansas is stuck in Oz. Where are we going and why? Well, she's off to see the wizard because he's the only one who can get her home. How are we going to get there? We're going to follow the yellow brick road. And oh, by the way, along this trip, we're going to make some new friends, and we have to avoid the Wicked Witch of the West and the creepy winged monkeys and all that stuff. What will it look like when we get there? There's no place like home. And notice at the end, I didn't say Dorothy gets back to Kansas. There's no place like home. We always want to have some sort of emotional component to whatever the resolution of the story is. So those 4 questions take us through, and they also introduce the typical storytelling elements that we see in our favorite books and movies. Where are we now introduces your hero or your heroine. Where are we going and why? That introduces a bit of a challenge and a quest.
Mm-hmm.
How are we going to get there? The quest and the journey continues, but it also is where the conflict resides.
Mm-hmm.
And what's it going to look like when we get there? That's the resolution, the satisfying end to the story. So we can take that and we can say, well, let's say we're talking about we're going to be moving our offices to a new place. Where are we going and why? Or I'm sorry, where are we now? We're outgrowing our new office, and we need to be closer to our clients, and so we've got to move. Where are we going and why? We're moving to a new downtown office that'll get us closer to our clients, and it'll be an easier commute for most of our people. How are we going to get there? We'll give you all the supplies that you need to do a simple move, and we'll keep you informed along the way. And what's it going to look like when we get there? We'll be in this brand new spacious office. We'll enjoy working in the city. We'll be closer to our clients, and our business will improve, and this will be a better place for all of us to work. So that's how you take kind of a dry situation like an office move and turn it into a compelling story that we can all get behind.
Yeah.
And that's you could really do that with anything. But think about, The Wizard of Oz, think about Star Wars, think about Shakespearean plays, think about anything that you like out in the world in terms of literature or film, and you'll see that story structure in there. It's pretty amazing. And so let's use that at work to draw people into what we're communicating.
I love that. I immediately went to Star Wars as well too. It seems like that theme alone is for Star Wars is in every movie. But what you just described though too is it really does explain the reason why I've heard people tell terrible stories. Like you're like you're enthralled. Somebody's like going along. I've had this like they're just one of those like maybe not self-aware. They're gonna like hook your ear and they're just gonna talk your ear off. And you're like, okay, it's entertaining, right? Sometimes I'm in it for the ride. Like, all right, this was entertaining. And there's no end. Like, wow, they went to another story and didn't finish it. I'm like, this leaves me so unsatisfied with that story.
Yeah. Maybe we know where we're going, but we don't know why, or the other way around. Maybe we don't know how we're going to get there, or to your point, we never get to the end, so I never get that payoff.
Yeah, or maybe there was never an end, right? The goal of this conversation was for you to talk, and you didn't even need to be there, right? I've literally just started stepping backwards before. I think for me as a communicator, though, I've learned some techniques to not allow that to happen. I felt like I was always a good listener, and I over-listened myself to learn that my time's valuable too. And if there truly isn't like an end to the story, like I'm going to find a way to get out of that. That's probably a whole nother topic for us on how to exit conversations and stories that don't, that aren't effectively going somewhere.
Yeah.
So those are two really important things. Know your audience, tell them a story. Tell them a story fits in so many different ways. And I loved how you broke it down to really 4 sentences. Like it doesn't even have to be long, but if you have, because a lot of organizations are moving, and to have just a 4-sentence reason and story to get there, that's enough to satisfy some folks to say, okay, that makes sense. Let's go.
Yeah. And I'll tell you about where I've seen it fall short too, when people don't use that is in say like a real major change situation in an organization where either it's an M&A or some sort of corporate transformation or some sort of upheaval in an organization. And I've asked in my consulting work, I'll ask a leader in the organization, okay, all of this is going on here. Why should somebody stick around? And if we don't have a story to explain that, then that we can show people, they're not going to come up with it themselves.
Right.
And that's when also the wheels start to to fall off, and all the money invested in the transformation or the acquisition or what have you goes bye-bye because employees are angry or confused or, don't know what's going on. So having a story behind anything that you're looking to execute, whether it's a project, some sort of transformation, some sort of change in the organization, you got to get a story behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, people aren't going to know how to make sense of it or understand the general point of what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And they won't be able to get behind it or see themselves in it. So that's where the story really can be crucial and be make or break, really, depending on the initiative.
Yeah, and this really ties into that third point, which is if you're not telling the story, people are going to tell their own story. And that leads right into that everything communicates, right? This is why they're all number one. That's why they're all number one. What can you tell me more about the everything communicates, other than everything communicates?
Well, yeah, it's because everything communicates. It's not just what you write and what you speak, but also how you write and speak.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps most importantly, what you don't do when you're not communicating, because not communicating is an act of communication.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we're not communicating about something for reasons that we feel are valid or are important and noble and so on. I don't feel I'm ready to communicate, so I better not say anything right now. Or we only have 90% of the story. I need to get 100% of the story ready before we can talk. Well, that might be well-intentioned, but while you're considering communication and thinking about communication and days and maybe weeks are going by, think again about your audience. What are they hearing? Zippo. They're not hearing anything. They're hearing silence. They're not seeing leadership or the key personnel in their normal work or what have you. So there's a void left, and they're left to make up their own version of what's going on, which is never as good as the story that you want to tell. Mm-hmm. So understanding that not communicating is an act of communication in and of itself. It's always better, in my opinion, even if the story is incomplete, to communicate something to help maintain or initiate or maintain your narrative. Mm-hmm. And then you are clear in that, hey, we don't know everything right now. We're telling you everything we can, and we'll have more to come soon. People appreciate being leveled with, even when the story is incomplete. Yeah. And it will help ensure that they're not coming up with something in their minds that veers way off of what it is you're looking to do. I could tell you another story of a consulting client. There were about 3,000 people in this particular part of the organization. And for about 1,200 of them, I believe it was they were getting a new leader or something like that. But they called a meeting with the 1,200 people, and they communicated what it is they had to communicate. And man, they were proud of themselves. We were timely. We got everybody in here. We told them everything we knew. This is great. Well, the problem was the other 1,800 people knew that something was going on, but had heard nothing about what it was. So they were concerned, like, why wasn't I invited to this meeting? Why aren't they telling us what they're talking about? What's going on? Are we being sold? Are we being laid off? What's happening? Well, no, there was absolutely no effect for these 1,800 people. That's why the organization didn't think to communicate to them about it. The news had no impact on them, but they didn't realize that information vacuum would kind of send them into a tizzy. And it created a whole situation that they had to then go back and fix. Mm-hmm. So again, even though it was well-intentioned, they freaked out 2/3 of the company because of the act of not communicating.
Right.
So always remember that how you communicate, even if you're not communicating. And then there's also things like body language and tone and how we write and how we speak and that sort of thing.
Right. Well, and from a people management perspective on communication, taking that same line is not communicating what our intentions are. Because one thing I've noticed, and I've seen it happen, like people that there were plans for, like you're the next, you're going to have this role, but we didn't tell them because we just assumed. How did they not know that, right? And that's why when it comes to one-on-one, meetings, quarterly, check-ins, really communicating what that future plan is. That's what this generation really wants as well too, is to know that there is a plan. And I know that, like, even coming from, my past, my history, the generation ahead of me, is we were always careful to even let somebody know. It would go to their head, or, maybe we didn't think they were quite the one. We're waiting for the perfect one. All terrible reasons to not say, you know what, you are the heir apparent, or if even that, like, we would like to get you there to this role. And then we help develop that. All of that lack of communication ends up with people leaving saying, I didn't know there was a plan. You never told me, right? And that's that lack of where everything what we were communicating was, we don't have anything for you, but that's not what we were saying. So that definitely fits as well. That's
a perfect example.
But talking about, like, everything does communicate, in the lack of words as well. You touched a little bit on body language, tone of voice, those type of things in communicating as well too. And I think and I know you work at a corporate level with organizations, like emails. One thing that always bugs me is, like, I didn't like the tone of that email, and like you can read the same email and get a different tone. I think it's Keenan and Peele. They do this great skit on, like, misinterpreting text messages, and that happens in emails as well too. It happens in text messages where tone, like, people are implying tone into just static words on a page. Like, how would you coach somebody through that kind of scenario of, look, you got to look at how you're presenting these words I call it static, but in just such a kind of flat way.
Well, first of all, I love Key and Peele. I haven't seen that sketch, so I got to look that up. That sounds awesome. It's there's that old rule about write something first, stick it in a drawer, and then look at it again after a period of time. I think that still applies. There are times, though, where email and texts and so forth aren't the best way to communicate. If it's a sensitive issue, if you look at something and before you send it and you realize this could be taken two ways, either rewrite it or pick up the phone. And that's also, again, part of knowing your audience. Is this something that whoever I'm communicating to might take out of context? Mm-hmm. Are they sensitive to a particular topic or something that might have happened? Being aware of their perspective, their frame of reference, their environment. Again, putting yourself in their mind, not making the communication about something you want to send, but make it about something that they are receiving, and how putting yourself in their mind frame and their perspective, how would they receive something? So that kind of falls under that umbrella. Mm-hmm. With emails and texts, more so emails, because it can be a longer form of communication. Shorter is better these days. Maybe not great for communication's sake, but it's just how it's the way we communicate these days. Yep. People are conditioned for short bursts. Yep. So if you find yourself writing an email that's 7 paragraphs long and the paragraphs have 5 sentences each, don't do that. Because people aren't going to read it, or if they read it, they won't most likely not digest it or comprehend it in the way you want. So emails, I think, should be in short paragraphs, bullets, numbered lists. Paragraphs should be 2 sentences, really, at most, if possible. If I catch myself writing longer paragraphs than that, I find a way to break them up. Yeah. Or I think, should this be 2 emails, or should this be a phone call? Again, in a text, which is a generally much shorter form of communication, really be sensitive to the length of that there as well. Mm-hmm. Now, when we cut things down, that's where what you're talking about, where context could be misconstrued. So again, it's best to get into that know your audience frame of mind. How is this person going to receive this?
Right. Yeah. I've worked with somebody recently who was known for very lengthy emails. In fact, people on the team were like, I don't have time to, because I didn't read the email. I knew I didn't have time because it was like all those paragraphs. So I had a conversation with them and very proudly like showed me, I am definitely a bullet points person. Like I want to have short statements, bullet points, break it out, even visually, right? It communicates better. But so I mentioned bullet points and being more concise, and people aren't reading emails, just giving some probably some, what do they call it? Just unsolicited feedback. And then he was like, hey, come here. And he took, was really proud of it. I mean, sincerely, had taken all those paragraphs and just threw some bullet points on each one of them. So the bullet points were in paragraphs. I'm like, I think my message didn't quite get there, but you're absolutely right. Like nobody's going to take the time. But the whole thing is, it's not taken away from the fact that it was all good information. Like
Sure.
It was all absolutely important information, but all of that was not going to be able to be digested. So that's a great point in regards to that.
And this person's not setting out to write terrible emails. This person was probably thinking, all right, I'm going to be thorough here. So nobody has any. So I'm answering questions up front and people understand. And so I'm going to give them all the information I can. And again, they were well-intentioned.
Very.
But not understanding the audience and how they're going to digest that information. Yeah. And so it's a good first step for the person to put the stuff into bullet points, but then we got to consolidate a little further. And when we think about what do we want people to think, feel, and do, that helps us consolidate. So, what do I want people to do? I want them to increase output by 10% on whatever project. Okay. So now look at this short novel that I've written. What in here is not going to contribute to them improving the throughput by 10%? Oh yeah. Well, I guess we could lose this. We could lose this. We could lose this. All of a sudden we've got a shorter email. So that's what the think, feel, do can do for you in practical terms.
Yeah, absolutely. Everywhere, right? Uses everywhere.
Sure.
All right. So know your audience. Everything communicates. Tell them a story. All number one, not in any particular order. I should probably read them in a different order, but they are all equal. I can read. You really have shown that they are of equal stature, because one without the other is not going to get what you're out there to accomplish. And just kind of one final thing I wanted to dive into. It's really a great testimony from one of your clients where where you went in and coached them on communication, and then the response was, our plant was 2 days behind. After Gary left, we weren't anymore. Now, for me, from just like especially missing the story, I felt like what you did to me was all right. So I went in, I told them a couple of tips, and now they're millionaires. That's it. Well, I know there's more in there, especially coming from manufacturing and coming from construction. Like, I want to know, like, what were specific things in the communication that helped communicate productivity? Because I'm a lean thinker, I'm a lean-minded, construction individual. Like, what are some specifics from that we're able to change to allow them to communicate to improve production?
Well, it's basically everything we just talked about. We had talked about the 3 number 1 rules, also about thinking about communication in business terms. So how is our communication tying to the goals of the organization, and what's the job of our communication, which we should also get in the habit of thinking about, even hallway conversations to executive presentations and everything in between. And this plant manager was better able to inform and motivate his team to do what they needed to do. And now the plant's running on time. And that goes back to this being a business skill, because a plant running on time means it's real money compared to a plant that was running 2 days behind schedule, impacting client service and all of that. And that's why communication is a business skill. We talked about communication. He was better able to go back to his team and inform and motivate them and explain what they had to do. Now the plant's running on time. The company's losing less money. It's really as simple as that. And if we view communication in business terms like that, there's so much we can accomplish. Imagine what we can accomplish if everybody can take communication more at heart, think about it as more of a business skill, like this plant manager did, and he fixed his problem. Imagine what we all could do with this kind of framework and thinking about communication in this way.
Sure. So just so I'm clear, though, you helped coach that plant manager. Plant manager changed his communication that created the opportunity to kind of explain the why to the team. So it's his communication to the organization. Was kind of the key to that?
Yeah. So this was this client, this company. I taught my communication workshop, which basically covers what we've just covered, to about 25 managers a month for about a year and a half. And he was one of the people in the course. And I had learned in the course that his plan had been behind schedule, and we followed up with him later. And he said, yeah, it was better able to get my team to do what we needed to do. And now it's running on time. So, make no mistake, he did the work. He and his team did the work. I enabled him through this coaching or through this training course to think about how he communicated with his team in a different way. And that sort of unlocked the logjam, so to speak, that was keeping them from running on time.
Okay. No, that's a good understanding of that. I mean, I talk about constraints and bottlenecks a lot in the business that I'm in. And that was the bottleneck, because a bottle only has one neck. So when things get funneled and then there's something that blocks it, you got to remove that blockage. Otherwise, everything backs up behind it. So that's a great story. I know specifically like in production stuff, there's other things that visually I'm a big visual communication fan, Kanban boards, things like that.
Oh yeah.
Seen where organizations have gone and have added them at different places in their organization to kind of release those bottlenecks to kind of increase productivity. So my assumption is, that's you pretty much had the nail on the top of the head. And there's a lot of things that kind of respond to that type of open communication, and hopefully open up other avenues for even better production. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, very good. Well, so before we wrap up, I've got a couple of questions at the end. How can the listeners get a hold of Gary Ross, and what's the best way to find you and communicate with you?
Well, website at www.insidecoms.com, INSIDECOMMS.com. And contact information is there too. Email is gary.ross, GARY.ROSS at insidecoms.com. Those are the two best ways to reach out. And if, anybody would love to just, brainstorm or get some ideas on how they could achieve results like that plant manager did, and talk a little bit more about communication and how it can help their business, happy to talk to folks.
Fantastic. Yeah, we'll leave those in the show notes. We'll have other ways, maybe some links, make it easy for people to get a hold of you. So awesome. I've got two questions I always end with. And the first question is, what does the world get wrong about Gary Ross?
What does the world get wrong about me? Well, I tend to boil communication challenges down to some simple principles like the ones we just talked about. And for some reason, people I don't know why, but people like to make things more complicated than they actually are sometimes. And I really like to simplify things for people, because in the end, especially with communication, there are some very simple and straightforward things that we can do that will make a huge difference. Like for this plant manager who spent a half a day in a workshop and solved a tremendous problem that he had in his facility. So I think when I talk about simplicity in work, sometimes it feels like people think, well, it needs to be more complicated than that. That can't possibly be the solution.
Right.
Well, in my not so humble opinion, it is.
So what people get wrong is you've got simple ideas, they complicate them. And that is so true though. Like I think people do look for something like it can't be that easy, right? And
Right.
then really to do the easy stuff isn't easy. Back to it's not soft skills, it's business development skills. They're not easy by any means, and they're not soft, meaning that they're difficult, they're challenging to do, but they are simple. They are easy.
Oh yeah, and that's a great distinction you just made. That the work itself, may not be, like that to everybody, but I think the principles are fairly similar to think about, and may take some work for people to embrace and fully use. But I try to make things as simple as possible, because in the end, who has time to be digesting these complicated things and 19 different frameworks and acronyms and all of that stuff?
Right.
You don't have time for that. Nobody wants to do that.
No.
Gary,
And
tell me
that's
what will
cool.
help me. And so I say, okay, do these 3 things.
Yeah.
Oh, really? That's it? Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, if you have me do 4 things, I'm not doing any of them. Good chance I'll try 3. Which brings me to the last question, which is what I always do on the Uncommon Communicator is, we've been talking over 50 minutes, 45, 50 minutes. If anybody made it to the end at this point, what is one thing that would be the best point for people to leave with from this conversation? Like I call it the UC moment. Like if we can get somebody to leave with one thing, then we've had a win. What's that one thing that people could get from today's conversation?
Yeah, that better workplace communication can help your career, and it can help your organization. And there are simple principles that can help you do that.
I love that. Simple principles help you get there. Remember the top the top 3 number ones, and you can't go wrong. Gary, thanks so much for this conversation. And that's all we got for everybody today. See you. Bye. Congratulations. You made it all the way to the end. You're officially a 1%er. Thanks for tuning into this episode of The Uncommon Communicator with me, your host, James Gable. Make sure you like and share this episode. This helps spread the message of communication to the world. Check out our website, The Uncommon Communicator, for more, and connect with me on LinkedIn to keep building those communication skills. See you next time.